Why do humans sing? Tell me, Watcher. Tell me why they give voice to that which cannot be spoken. Tell me why they do this, even as their worlds burn. When the towers of Tharja fell, did we look to the horizon and say, things might be better there? No. We stood our ground, and from the corpses, built a fortress to defy gods. Our way is to endure. Theirs, to hope. A eulogy for humanity. Deep in the heart of a dead star, an old arthropod limped through ancient halls. His feet tapped on the flat ground, click, 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 and the sound echoed between diamond pillars. The glittering columns were larger than mountains, and older than most life. Up into the black darkness they rose, and from within each came a glow that bathed the hall of icons in a somber blue. The curator regarded the swaddled infant resting in his claws. The tiny primate stared back, and he could not help but shudder. It was an unsettling sight even now, decades after the cleansing. It had taken a grand coalition of species from across the galaxy to put them down. And still, these apes had made them bleed. He found he could not meet the infant's gaze. He stopped in front of a glowing two-dimensional shape. The portal cast flickering shadows on the walls. A statue stood to one side. A winged reptilian creature, with rows of sharp teeth and long, dexterous fingers. Sapient carnivores were always trouble. The Fomi had been no exception. After decades of illegal expansion, they invaded a small planet that was home to uncontacted but intelligent life. They consumed the entire population. Genocide is the worst sin, and it requires retribution in kind. Lightning fissures the sky as storm-piled clouds tower around my flagship. I look down upon a churning ocean. Unnatural storms batter an enormous mountain, jutting proudly from the waves. Millions of Fomi huddle within. Their first city has become their last. I tell myself, they brought this upon themselves. Swarms of flying reptiles wearing ceremonial battle armor take to the skies in a last-ditch effort to stave off their own extinction. My officers cheer, but I can't even smile. I give the order, and the sky breaks open. Ecological warfare was nothing new to the Exant. Most species had a critical dependence on one substance or another. For the Fomi, it was water. It was a simple matter to poison the oceans on their major worlds. Devastating storms battered their cities and ruined their infrastructure. Soon enough, they were so weak that the fledgling empire collapsed under its own weight. A single Exant fleet led by General Shio was able to wipe them out. This was Shio's first strategy against humanity as well. Like the Fomi, they were extremely dependent on liquid water. Unfortunately, it was less successful against them. In less than a year, they discovered a way to extract the poison on a planetary scale. They immediately purified all their worlds. After another decade, they discovered a million uses for the substance, from industry to medicine to war. And thanks to the Exant, they possessed a nearly unlimited supply. In the end, all Shio did was help the humans. The curator glanced at the portal and for a moment considered passing through. He knew it would lead to a mountain island on a watery planet. Within that mountain dwelt a single inhabitant, an icon. The only living Fomi was very intelligent and a good conversationalist. Like all icons, she had been cloned back to life as a monument to a dead race. And like all icons, she reminded the curator of his guilt. The Fomi may have committed the worst sin, but what was a cleansing, if not sacred genocide? The scriptures claimed there was no sin, as long as an icon was created to honor the extinct. But ancient texts did little to ease his conscience. He continued until he came across a second portal and its statue. Like the others, this statue was life-sized. A long, many-segmented body lay half on the ground and half looming overhead. Dozens of skittering legs flanked the chitinous body. 2 clawed appendages hung from the uppermost segment. And perched on the very top was a naturally armored head. The Lu had arrived from somewhere outside the galaxy and immediately began taking worlds. This was the only cleansing in which diplomacy was not even an option. They were just too different. They were relentless and ignored any attempts to meet. It wasn't even clear that they understood the concept of diplomacy in general. But the scriptures are clear, and the greatest sin must not go unpunished. I look down upon a dead hive world. The former garden planet has been transformed into a Lu colony. At its peak, it housed trillions of drones. Now, it is little more than a husk. Countless entrances and exits pock the orange landscape, and a maze of tunnels crisscrosses the interior. I have neither the need nor the inclination to once again delve into their depths. Deep within those labyrinthine corridors lurks the last Lu Queen and her few remaining drones. The sterility virus has done its work. I command the world breakers to begin. Asteroids begin raining down upon the scarred landscape, blasting enormous craters into the hive and casting chunks out into the black abyss. The curator looked up at the statue of the Lu Queen. He had only met the icon once. She was an unsettling individual for many reasons. During the conflict, they didn't even know if the Lu had language, but as soon as the new queen hatched, she began speaking the Xanth tongue with perfect fluency. And unlike the other icons, she seemed to actually remember the cleansing that wiped out her species. The curator found himself unable to speak with her again. After humanity survived the poison, General Shio decided a new approach was in order. He unleashed upon them the same sterility virus that had hamstringed the Lu. The humans quickly focused research on artificial forms of reproduction. Soon, they were bypassing pregnancy altogether and mass-producing perfect warriors, using the knowledge they gained, solving the problem the Xanth introduced. Again, all Shio managed to do was help them. The curator continued to make his way between the luminescent pillars. After some time, he arrived at a third portal. This one was guarded by a statue of a fearsome ape. The life-size representation stood on all four limbs and towered over him. Giant fangs protruded from its mouth and absurd muscles covered its body. The pond had shown promise at first. Their homeworld was rich with all kinds of natural resources, and they were willing to trade with anyone. Considerable business savvy, combined with a natural proficiency in combat, allowed their mercantile empire to grow quickly. No one dared rob them or even look at them in the wrong way. Eventually, they became proud, and old instincts began to overcome their more recent equanimity. A failed negotiation became a boycott, which became a blockade, which became a war, which ended when the pond launched weapons of mass destruction against a former customer. They went extinct as a result. The greatest sin requires the most severe response. General Shio took advantage of the extreme empathy the pond seemed to display towards members of their own race. Empathy is not an unusual trait in apes, but it was surprisingly strong in them. So strong that it was nearly impossible for one of them to intentionally harm another. So he infected the pond with a deadly disease. There is no cure, and the only solution is to immediately kill the infected. It only took a few years. As expected, the pond were unwilling to do what was necessary until it was too late. Their mercantile empire collapsed like a house of cards as their infrastructure wasted away. A single tactical strike rendered them extinct. My gaze lifts to a mountain and to the wind-swept citadel perched on top. The virus has burned their empire from the inside, hollowed it out like a carnivorous parasite. In the end, they had no choice but to retreat to their home planet and their last stronghold. Ancient ruins and monolithic statues dot the horizon. Directly behind me, the mountain descends into a jungle as deep as an ocean. I wonder what leviathans lurk beneath that canopy. I find myself longing for the life of a scientist. Why did I have to be born into this role? Why must I bear this burden? The wind carries down sounds from the ramparts. Impotent screams of rage perhaps. Or supplications to an uncaring god. Regardless, the pond know their end has come. I don't have to be here. I don't have to see this. Why do I torture myself this way? Perhaps I feel their death must have some meaning. If I don't mourn their passing, who will? I command the thunder barges to complete this cleansing. Lightning courses from the heavens, and the pond pay the final price for their sins. After the second failure, General Shio decided to infect the humans with the same affliction that had wiped out the pond. Their physiology was similar to that of humanity. Both species had 4 limbs, each with 5 fingers. Both had soft skin covered in hair, and both gave birth to live young. They even had similar social structures. If it worked on the pond, perhaps it would work on humanity. Shio infected the human hub worlds first, and from there, the plague found its way to every human planet. He thought humanity would refuse to do what it must until it was too late, just like the pond. Surely, the wholesale slaughter of infected innocents was a level of depraved pragmatism to which humanity could never sink. But they were nothing if not surprising. Beneath all their beauty and knowledge lurked a terrible barbarism. They experimented on their own people in futile attempts to find a cure. Not only did they kill the infected, they razed entire worlds to stop the spread. It worked. Of the first 3 attempts, this was the only one that did any lasting damage to the humans. Shio hit them hard and made them scared. But in doing so, he awoke old instincts. He forced the humans to cross certain lines that had not been crossed in millennia. He reminded mankind what it was like to snarl into the implacable night. Thanks to his hubris, the Exanth now faced a more primal humanity. It wasn't always like this. Humanity had seemed wonderful at first, before the catastrophe. They brought so much art, so much science and wonder and joy. They helped the Exanth cure diseases, showed them how to grow crops in the most extreme climates. The humans were natural problem solvers. Terraforming is not something young species know how to do. But they brought dead worlds to life, like it was second nature. But they spread so quickly and so unpredictably. Who would have thought they would colonize an entire system with no water, that compound so vital to their existence? Or build cities inside boiling gas giants? The prospect of one day being neighbors with these beautiful lunatics was frightening. So General Shio implemented a containment plan. It would be subtle. If all went well, the humans wouldn't even know they were being manipulated. It seemed simple at the time. Use social engineering to spread the Exanth religion, HFY, to human worlds. Evangelism was a tried and true strategy. No 2 members of the same religion would have any reason to hurt each other. Any Exanth child knows this. In retrospect, it was clear that a more thorough examination of human history would have been prudent. They did indeed adopt portions of HFY. It took a few centuries, but soon enough, their dominant religion was starting to look a lot like the Exanth faith. Shio expected this to increase friendliness between the 2 species. It did not. You see, before this point, the concept of heresy was not something the Exanth were terribly familiar with. They do not go to war over religious disagreements. As it turns out, humans do. They proclaimed their version of HFY to be divinely inspired, and the Exanth faith a corruption of the truth. With no better options, the Exanth government came clean and admitted that they had been responsible for this religion the humans now clung to with such zeal. It came from flesh and blood, not from divine. The Exanth expected anger, resentment, maybe even denial. At worst, the humans might sever diplomatic ties. What they got was a holy war that burned 1,000 systems to the ground. Humanity declared a cleansing of their own, tore halfway across the galaxy, and nearly cut out their heart. Never before had the galaxy seen such reckless savagery. Was this truly the same race that had taught the Exanth how to sing? The curator couldn't decide which was more terrifying. The war itself or the fact that humanity had always been capable of such savagery. No cleansing was longer or more brutal than this one. 3 times Shio tried to end them. And 3 times he only made them stronger. He poisoned their water. They learned to use poison. He rendered them sterile. This didn't even slow them down. What kind of abominations increase in number after you eliminate their natural reproductive process? He infected them with a terrible plague. They killed the infected and in doing so, remembered what it was like to survive at any cost. The curator sighed. He wanted nothing more than to say he finally figured it out. That he identified a human weakness and exploited it. But humanity had so many weaknesses, and for each weakness, they had already found a way to turn it into a strength. Their past failures protected them, like overlapping plates of armor. By this point, the only solution was overwhelming power. Humanity was on their doorstep before the tide turned. I stand on a mountain and watch as the human catastrophe reaches its zenith. Their techno-paladins take to the ascent sky, shining rays of gold in their wake, and carve our thunder barges like so much gristle. Our orbital god cannons dispense justice on a continental scale, and the humans respond in kind. None of that matters now. I look to the east and to the west. The towers of Tharja dominate both horizons. Like the bones of a dead god, they rise from the ground, pierce the firmament, and hold Medina Prime's twin moons in place, lest they stray from their celestial path. Today they burn. Titanic columns of fire light the night sky and illuminate the war-torn landscape with a ruddy glow. Is it possible? If they fall, what does it mean? Is God on their side after all? I realize that I don't mind. Perhaps this is my redemption. Our redemption. For all the species we've killed, for all the death we've caused, can anyone argue that we don't deserve this? Burning mountains fall from the sky. Colossal heaps of metal and stone. I hold my arms wide and welcome the end. But God has other plans. I watch as Armageddon scours the planet, as fire pours from the heavens and consumes both armies. The world trembles, but he spares me. How do I, the greatest sinner, the ultimate hypocrite, deserve life when so many do not? A million lights appear in the northern sky. The coalition. Our salvation has come, but my heart sinks. How foolish of me to hope I might deserve redemption. I am a necessary evil, and there is no escaping the necessity of my sin. Even the might of humanity faltered against a united galaxy. General Shio pushed them back to their home system at a hideous cost. The conflict lasted centuries longer than it had any right to. The humans kept fighting, even after their own defeat was a foregone conclusion. When the grim truth stared them in the face, they laughed and spit in its eye. Their worlds burned, and still, they sang of a victory that would never come. The curator wondered what it was like to be driven by such insane optimism. They caused 7 more extinctions, simply retreating. The destruction was so great that many Exanth began to see these as the end times. The most holy Exanth world lay in ruins, and their faith itself was in jeopardy. Even their victory at Medina Prime was devastatingly costly at best, and Pyrrhic at worst. The curator stopped in front of the last portal and the newest statue. The human-shaped stone was silent, but he saw the question in its blank eyes. Who paid the price for your arrogance? He stepped through the portal. An expanse of green stretched all the way to the horizon. Trees, animals, and all manner of wonderful alien life peppered the landscape. 2 rivers met in the distance, and between them lay a bountiful garden. He couldn't imagine a more fitting home for the new icon. The last human would live out her life in her natural habitat, safe from the prying eyes of a galaxy that feared her very existence. The curator looked down at her tiny face. So helpless and innocent. But when he looked at her fragile skin, the huge head, those eyes filled with relentless curiosity, the prehensile thumbs, and the hands with 5 fingers, he couldn't help but remember their terrifying potential. Never had the creation of a new icon filled him with such dread. He had been against it from the beginning. It is our way, they had said. A human icon must be created, lest we become guilty of the worst sin. We already bear that guilt. Let us not delude ourselves on that matter. A living human would accomplish nothing, except perhaps to assuage the guilt of pious fools. Then what possible danger is there? Of what consequence is possibility when humanity is involved? They called him paranoid. He called them blind. You do not know a person until you fight them. And no one knew humanity like he did. I know why humans sang. When all was dark, they saw the light. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.